Hello, everyone. I'm Sheila Sorkin. I'm the PYM Aging Support Coordinator, and I'm just delighted to join you this evening for this Spirituality and Aging workshop. It's been a pleasure collaborating on the development of this interactive program with Kevin Lovelady and Rebecca Schellenbach, and we're happy to have Emily Province with us as a tech host. So we appreciate ARCH, New York Yearly Meetings, Aging Resources, Consultation and Help Group to make this evening happen. I also want to thank the Concord Working Group on Aging for suggesting this topic. We appreciate that very much. And finally, I want to thank PYM for supporting it. And I'm looking forward to enjoying this evening with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Kevin Lovelady, and I am the interim director of ARCH. I've been an ARCH coordinator for a couple of years. I began right before the pandemic and have been working with a team of coordinators through the pandemic and figuring out how to do ARCH, what ARCH is in this world where there's so much distance. And so one of the ways that we've been figuring that out is developing workshops. And we're so happy to be able to bring a workshop to Concord Quarter and PYM. And it's a real honor to have you all here. I am the interim director. I'm currently a student, an MDiv student at Earlham School of Religion. And I am a chaplain at Albany Medical Center, where I've worked there since 2018, maybe. But as a facilitator, it's just like really so exciting to be able to connect with so many people. And I'd like to pass that to Rebecca for an introduction.
Thanks, Kevin. Yes, I'm Rebecca. I'm one of the ARCH coordinators for the Farmington Scipio Regional Meeting, which is one of the regions in New York Yearly Meeting. And it's a really big region, most of central New York. The central part of New York State is my region. And I belong to Poplar Ridge Monthly Meeting, which is on Cayuga Lake, one of the Finger Lakes in New York State. And I began my position with ARCH in the early part of the pandemic, in 2020. And I've found that the theology and spirituality of mutual accompaniment, which we will talk about in this workshop, has been transformational for my other pastoral care job, which is as a hospice chaplain. I'm really glad to be with you all here tonight. And then Emily, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm happy to. Hello, friends. My name is Emily Province. My membership is in 15th Street Meeting, which is in New York Yearly Meeting. And I have no real connection to the Aging Resources Consultation and Help Program, but I am a person that Rebecca and Kevin knew would be willing to jump on and help provide some tech support tonight. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm your technical host and very happy to see you all.
We are so lucky to have Emily here as a tech host because we are, as Rebecca said, presenting a very ambitious and tech-heavy program this evening. So, so many thanks to Emily and to all of you for being here. I'm going to give a brief introduction to ARCH. In 2007, two women, Barbara Spring and Anita Paul, set out to make a program to train Quakers to help other friends with issues of aging. So this program of training and help became a very vital program in New York Yearly Meeting, and well over 100 friends took this training. Over the last decade, this model began to shift. As the community of friends involved with ARCH were all aging, the lines between who needed help and who could help was becoming increasingly blurred. So Arch responded to this and began to shift the model out of one based on a helper and the person being helped to more of a horizontal model of a network of people participating in a practice that we call mutual accompaniment. So mutual accompaniment in the Arch model says that we are all in this together. There's the hierarchy of who can provide and who is receiving is oftentimes a balance. And this really gets down to some of the fundamentals of how we relate to each other. So in Arch, we believe that aging and aging in community needs some serious, some foundations. And some of those things are, how do we practice mutual support for each other as we grow older? How do we practice being vulnerable with each other? How do we practice identifying our needs? How do we practice articulating our needs? And how do we practice hearing other people's needs? So in this workshop, we're going to be bringing some of these elements in. We're going to be having some opportunities to practice being vulnerable with each other. And that's as vulnerable as you want to be. We're going to have some practice listening deeply to others. And we're going to have practice doing this all in spiritual community.
We're going to start now with some big questions. We're going to ask you to look closely at how you are feeling in this moment about your own particular aging and aging process. I invite you to think of these, explore these queries. Do you think of yourself as old? Do you feel old? How does feeling old feel? Are your feelings about being old or growing older positive or negative?
I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll.
Thank you. Can everybody see these results? Yes. Okay, great. So we have a very, so for number one, do you think of yourself as old? We have 24% of the room saying yes, 32% saying no, and 43% sometimes. Do you feel old? 30% says yes, which is higher than do you think of yourself as old? 27% say no, and 43% say sometimes. I totally relate to the sometimes. Okay, looking at how do you relate to your own aging, with 1 being absolute fear and 10 being anticipating with excitement. We have a group here that is really ranging toward excitement and joy in terms of thinking about their own aging. I don't see that there's a ton of fear represented here. There's a lot of energy kind of right in the middle, a lot of 5s and 6s, and slowly dipping down with some 10s, which is just quite wonderful. But wherever you fall on this, it's all wonderful. It's just really nice to see, like, this particular group at this particular time, how people are feeling and relating to their own aging. does anyone have any reflections on that? Were there any surprises? Were there any comments that you'd like to make about that poll, or kind of seeing anonymously the way people feel in this group? So Nancy says, I feel old in my body, my mind, not so much. From 1 to 10, from absolute fear to anticipation with excitement. It's a wide spectrum, and of course, we can be all over that spectrum at any point, right? Day by day, hour by hour, year by year, and circumstance by circumstance. So at this point, it's a little heavy to go into this, but I invite us all to share words or thoughts that have to do with fears and anxieties about growing older. These can be your own, or these can be ones that you can imagine. Okay, friends, I'd like to invite you to see these words that you have brought into the space, into the room. And I would like to invite us to just hold them with the depth that they deserve. And hold these in community as well. Well, we will bring this back toward the end. But at this point, I'd like to pass to Rebecca.
Thank you, friends, for speaking so honestly. So the first time I noticed that denialism, that culture of denying the aging process, I was really young. I was growing up in the 80s, and there was a advertising campaign from Oil of Olay that maybe some of you remember too, that the tagline was, I don't intend to grow old gracefully. I intend to fight it every step of the way. And I remember this as a girl, as a young girl, really inculcating this, oh, there's something that really needs to be fought about aging. And the understory there is that aging well, aging gracefully is about not aging, not changing. The way to age well is to not change, is to not age. And what that does to us is makes for internalized ageism in the relationship to our own aging process. And it makes for this space of internal fighting to not change. So in this workshop, we're going to return again and again to this question of how to work on a different relationship to our aging and to changing, rather than fighting it or denying it or fearing it. And that's not to say, that's not to underplay the kind of enormity or heaviness or realness of some of these things that we just spoke aloud, of some of these challenges in a culture that is so unforgiving and merciless toward vulnerability, and so committed to denying aging and changing. But even with those challenges, we can find, as I think it was Kruger who said, we can find a spiritual opportunity. And this is what we're going to practice now together. This kind of shift of perspective.
In the spirit of vulnerability, we are going to, at this point, identify a challenge that we hold, either a challenge or a fear that we hold, about growing older, about aging, something that we might already be experiencing, something that we fear in the future. It may have already come to mind, you might need a minute, but I invite you to take a second and write down this fear. Okay, so let's take a minute to share out into the room how that felt to be vulnerable and to listen.
I felt very honored that the two people I was in a group with were willing to share so deeply.
Yes. I just felt it was wonderful to be able to share in such a deep way, because we don't often have those opportunities in our daily lives.
A lot can happen in 10 minutes. And thank you all for participating in that exercise.
So we're going to touch back in with our looking at aging, looking at change and being with change. In a real sense, our spirituality of aging is our spirituality of how we be with change, with each other, in community. So we're just going to look again one more time at change and at the spirituality of change. So I'm wondering if I can have two volunteers to read a couple of quotations that will come up in a graphic on our shared screen. You can just raise your hand if you'd be willing to read this out loud.
All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Octavia Butler.
Now in my 80s, I am slowing down. Recent heart problems have made me realize how I have taken this faithful servant for granted. Recently, when I experience heart palpitations, I pause to thank my heart for its long service. I tell it I would understand if it wants to stop now to rest. This practice makes me value each moment. I find I am full of gratitude and quiet joy. Diana L.
And thank you, Melanie. So the quotation from Octavia Butler that Melanie read, we chose because it's a macro vision. It's a theology of change. God is change, Octavia Butler said. It's something that then in the second quote, which Tom read, is applied in one human particular life, in the quotation from Diana L. And I found that quote so moving from Diana, just the way that she articulates changes happening in her body, hard changes, her heart changing, her heart having palpitations, have become this way of embodying a theology and spirituality of change that is about gratitude, an opportunity to practice gratitude for her very own heart, for her actual heart. And I found it very moving and very hopeful, actually, a hopeful way that we can Here's an example of someone experiencing a change that is hard and difficult and shifting the perspective and finding gratitude in it. That's an embodied spiritual practice of being with the changes that aging brings.
There are lots of opportunities. We've heard some people share already about some of the gifts, the spiritual gifts of growing older. And thinking of that poll that we took from 1 to 10, we're going to generate now another word cloud. We're going to think about the gifts, the joys, the excitement, the things that are potential in aging and growing older. Friends, are there any reflections as you look at these pieces of art that you've generated? You can feel free to speak them into the room. I don't know if I'll be able to see you raise your hand.
Well, I'm wondering what is meant by a word cloud and how they were assembled, because I see on the left a lot of words that would basically conjure up negative thinking, and on the right, positive thinking. But on the left is children. I'm trying to see what's negative about that. So how was this developed?
What
This
you're
is,
seeing,
go ahead, yes.
what you're seeing is something that was automatically generated through what you spoke in response to the two queries. So the one on the left is the response to the one about fears. You see the word children there because someone mentioned fearing their children watching them decline or becoming a burden to their children. That's why that word is there.
Thank you for helping me.
I noticed there seemed to be many more words in the joys than in the fears, which is nice.
As we went through the positive things, I just found myself sitting here smiling.
The tension in my body from the first word cloud dissipated with all the joyful aspects of the second.
Any further reflections, friends?
I just wanted to say that it seems to me that what happens to me when I'm depressed, I fall into that other side and get almost drowned in it. And when I return to being happy, I can drown in the other stuff on the right. And it's a constant back and forth sometimes. Usually I spend most of the time on the right there, thankfully.
I think I see loneliness on both sides. And I really want to raise that up, that aloneness is a gift, if we can see it that way.
Maybe expressing it as solitude on the positive side would be clearer.
Solitude is there.
Is solitude there? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's right next to the word. It's next to the word.
I'll find it.
What strikes me is that we hold both of these things within us all the time. They exist side by side. And they're both true.
Thank you. Yes, I'll like what I was saying about loss being the other side of love is like if we didn't have love, we wouldn't feel the loss. And there are this is, like you said, this exists in all of us, and it is a continuum. And as we recognize that about ourselves and about the friends that we're in this group with, and the friends, big F and small f friends in our lives, this just puts us at a different sort of place to be with others, to be with them in every iteration of where they're at, and to really hold loneliness as both a fear and solitude, the gift of solitude as a gift, and to know that these things are, oftentimes you can't pull them apart.
And I don't think we want to label ourselves if we're feeling lonely one day and not the next day. So to say one is negative and one is positive feels like it's a dualism, like you said, that doesn't exist.
Right.
And we don't want to do that to ourselves.
Right.
Eliot distinguishes between aloneness and loneliness. And aloneness is simply part of the human condition. Loneliness is fighting that realization, if that is helpful.
Yes. Well, it's also helpful in connecting me with everyone else. We all feel alone and lonely from time to time. It's another way for me to connect.
What a beautiful paradox, Sally. That's beautifully put. We're going to revisit what you wrote about on your piece of paper way back when. And we're going to do this. Someone said just now, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who said, that these things that are side by side are both true and both always there. And we sort of navigate and go back and forth between the two of them. And we're going to do this with the challenge that, or the fearful thing that you wrote about and shared about in groups. So just take a moment right now to look at that, whatever it was that you identified as a challenge or a fear around aging and changes associated with aging, and that you shared about in groups. And like thinking about our quotation from Diane, how she found in the struggles, the real actual struggles of her heart to continue beating, she found an opportunity for gratitude for that heart, for all the beats it had given her. That's that side-by-side thing. How can we practice this with what you wrote about? Take a moment to see if there is a way to look at that thing and find the loneliness that is also solitude, for example, the heart palpitations that are also give rise to gratitude, for example. And then you will go back into breakout rooms and have an opportunity to practice making that shift, or beginning to make that shift with this real live actual issue that you've brought with you here to this time together.
Welcome back, everyone. And I'd like to invite you once again to share what that was like for you. And without sharing the content, share what it was like to be back in that group of three and your experience of doing that deep, vulnerable sharing and the deep listening.
It was fun. Quite a bit of fun. That's the best word I have.
That's great.
Having
I
been
see.
with these people once before, it was much easier and productive, although not a word I really want to use, but it's the one that comes to mind.
I felt a closeness with the people that I was with them those 2 times by the end.
I was thinking about our first cloud. I'm not sure anyone said death. I don't think we were afraid of death. What struck me is very interesting. It's all the other stuff.
Any former Catholics out there? I talked about the fear of hell. There it is.
I see Sally's hand.
I found it more challenging to be vulnerable in this way because I had to reach for something I couldn't see. And I knew it was the key to freedom for me, but I wasn't sure what it was. So I had to ask God. And I was surprised at what the answer was for me. And I'm so grateful for this process because for me, it's, you know, trusting God is always the right way for me, but I can't always do it, especially in the moment, being asked a question. I find our trust in God to be miraculous for living. Absolutely imperative, vulnerable, not easy, and completely clarifying. Thank you for this opportunity, friends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Sally's. Sally, is your hand?
We ended talking about the necessity for spiritual community and the deep yearning for the kind of intimacy that we can share as we get older and more honest and have this shared experience, and how important it is for meetings to offer opportunities for people to be in a spiritual small group intimacy.
Well, thank you for bringing that to light. And thank you, friends. We are coming to the end of our 2 hours together. And I just feel so blessed to have been here with you tonight and for the deep sharing and the deep connecting that happened here.
Thank
So
you all for participating.
Thank you, everyone.